Lost people, unexplainable phenomenon, unsolved death cases, scary and mysterious dolls. Today we are going to cover most of the recorded cases that proves that ghosts exist. In March 1973 was 3 months after Eastern Airline Plane 401 crash. Plane number 318, which was one of the planes, installed some parts from Plane 401 and other planes. Stories began circulating that employees of Eastern Airlines and numerous passengers had reported sightings of dead crew members, Captain Robert Loft and Second Officer, Flight Engineer Donald Repo, sitting aboard other L-1011s, including, in particular, N318A. One of the pilot who have been in the middle of the flight to Florida with his co-pilot have reported that they heard a knocking sound from a hell hole, a little room where flight engineering tasks usually takes place. This little room is located downside of the plane, where engineer can have access to the front wheel of the plane. After carefully checked if there was someone locked inside, he found nothing. But he had a huge feeling that there was someone in here. Unfortunately, the room was clear enough and there were no spaces where someone can hide. Finally, now when the pilot decided to go back, his first step into first stair, he noticed the late engineer Don Repo was on his exit watching him and suddenly vanished in front of him. On the other side, a lady who was just a passenger traveling in plane number 318, following her huge scream and panic. The lady mentioned that the empty seat next to her, a man just appeared and vanished. When she was asked how the man looks like, she described exactly how Captain Robert Loft looks like. These stories speculated that parts of the crashed aircraft were salvaged after the investigation and refitted into other L-1011s. The reported hauntings were said to be seen only on the planes that used the spare parts. Gossip regarding the sighting of the spirits of Don Repo and Bob Loft spread throughout Eastern Airlines to the extent that Eastern's management warned employees that they could be dismissed if caught spreading ghost stories. While Eastern Airlines publicly denied their planes were haunted, they reportedly removed all the salvaged parts from their L-1011 fleet. Over time, the reporting of ghost sightings stopped. An original floorboard from Flight 401 remains in the archives at History Miami in South Florida. Pieces of Flight 401's wreckage can also be found in Ed and Lorraine Warren's Occult Museum. The story of the crash and its aftermath were documented in John G. Fuller's 1976 book The Ghost of Flight 401. When you think of a haunted dolls, it's likely the creepy old Victorian-looking porcelain kind that springs to mind. None of which you probably have laying around. Still, don't get too comfortable around any kids' toys too soon, though. In December 2013, a Disney's Frozen Elsa doll that was gifted for a Christmas in the Houston area made headlines earlier that year, when it seemingly became haunted. The doll recited phrases from the movie Frozen and sang, "Let It Go," when a button on its necklace was pressed. For 2 years it did that in English, Mother Emily Madonia said. In 2015, it started doing it alternating between Spanish and English. There wasn't a button that changed these, it was just random. The family has owned the doll for more than 6 years and never changed its batteries. The mother says the doll would randomly begin to speak and sing even with its switch turned off. The family decided to throw the creepy doll out in December of 2019. Weeks later, they found it inside a bench in their living room. The kids insisted they didn't put it there, and I believed them because they wouldn't have dug through the garbage outside, Madonia told KPRC2 Houston News. At that point, Elsa ceased to sing the English rendition of "Let It Go" altogether, speaking only Spanish when pressed. The family then double-bagged the bizarre doll and placed it at the bottom of their garbage, which was taken out on garbage day. They went on a trip shortly after, but when they returned, Elsa too had come back, and was waiting in the backyard of their home. This time, the family mailed Elsa to a family friend in Minnesota, who taped the haunted doll to the front bumper of his truck. It doesn't seem to have made its way back to Houston yet, as per Madonia's latest February Facebook update on the creepy doll. In July of 1897, Edward Stribling Trout Shue was convicted of first-degree murder for strangling his wife and breaking her neck. Trout Shue's trial, held in Greenbrier County, West Virginia, rested entirely upon circumstantial evidence that strangely proved Shue's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt to jurors who were presented evidence from beyond the grave. The facts included post-mortem statements from Shue's wife, Zona Hester Shue, who was said to appear before her mother 4 weeks after death and reported what truly occurred in her murder. It was the first and only time testimony from a ghost was admitted as evidence in a United States Superior Court trial, and it secured a conviction. At 10 a.m. on January 23, 1897, 23-year-old Zona Shue's body was found by an errand boy. She was lying on the floor in their house, face down at the foot of the stairs, stretched with one arm tucked underneath her chest and the other extended. Her head was cocked to one side. Trout Shue arrived home before the coroner, Dr. George Knapp, attended. Shue had already moved his wife's body to their bed, where he dressed her in a high-necked gown. As Dr. Knapp began examining Zona, Trout Shue exhibited overpowering emotions and cradled Zona's head in her shoulders, sobbing and weeping. Dr. Knapp stopped his exam out of respect for the grieving spouse and signed off the death to everlasting fate. A traditional wake was held before Zona's next-day burial, and attendants noticed peculiar behavior from Trout Shue. When the casket was opened for viewing, he immediately placed a scarf over Zona's neck, as well as propping her head with a pillow and blanket. Shue then put on another spectacular show of grief and made it impossible for mourners to get a close look at her face. Zona Shue was buried in the Soul Chapel Methodist Cemetery in Greenbrier County. Initially, everyone who knew the Shules accepted Zona's death as not suspicious, except for her mother, Mary Jane Hester. Hester disliked Shue from the moment they met and suspected foul play at hand. "The work of the devil!" Hester exclaimed. She prayed every night, for 4 weeks on end, that the Lord would reveal the truth. Then, in the darkness of night, when Mary Jane Hester was wide awake, Zona's spirit allegedly appeared. It was not in a dream, Hester reported. It was in person. First the apparition manifested as light, then transformed to a human figure, which brought a chill upon the room. For 4 consecutive nights, Hester claimed her daughter's ghost came to the foot of her bed and reported facts of the crime that extinguished her life. Zona's ghost was said to reveal a history of physical abuse from her husband. Her death reportedly resulted from a violent fight over a meal the night before she was found. Trout Shue was said to have strangled Zona, crushing her windpipe and snapping her neck at the first joint. To prove dislocation, Zona's figure turned its head 180 degrees to the rear. Mary Jane Hester steadfastly maintained her daughter's ghost was real, and Zona's reports of the cause of her death were accurate. Hester was so compelling in her paranormal description that she convinced local prosecutor, John Preston, to reopen the case. Preston's investigation found Trout Shue had a history of violence. In another state, he'd served prison time for assaults and thefts. He'd been married twice before, one other wife dying under mysterious circumstances. By now the Greenbrier community was reporting more peculiar behavior from Shue. He'd been making comments to the effect that no one would ever prove I killed Zona. Combined with Coroner Knapp's admission that he failed to conduct a thorough exam, Preston established sufficient grounds to exhume Zona's body and conduct a proper post-mortem examination. Zona was autopsied by 3 medical doctors on February 22, 1897, with the official cause of death being anoxia from manual strangulation compounded by a broken neck. Bruising consistent with finger marks was noted on Zona's neck. Her esophagus was contused, and her first and second cervical vertebrae were fractured. Anatomically, they're known as the C1 atlas and the C2 axis, which combines to make the first joint at the base of the skull. An inquest was held and Trout Shue was summoned to testify. Although he denied being present at the time of Zona's death and bearing culpability, he was unable to establish an alibi and considered an unreliable, self-serving witness. It was ruled a homicide and Trout Shue was charged with her murder. Trout Shue's first-degree murder trial began in Greenbrier Circuit Court on June 22, 1897. A panel of 12 jurors was convened who heard evidence from a number of witnesses, including Shue himself. John Preston was reluctant to subpoena Mary Jane Hester as a witness, fearing her ghost story would damage credibility. However, Shue's defense lawyer opened that can of worms and called Zona's mother to the stand. Evidently, it backfired. This verbatim excerpt is from the transcript of Mary Jane Hester's testimony. It's still on record in the West Virginia State Archives. Thanks for watching. If you like the content of this video, click the thumb, share the video, subscribe to our channel and press notification bell for other videos with content like this. Let us know if there is anything you want to know in greater details. See you next time.